Welcome into Flight Plan. Tim McMaster here, along with Zach Rosenblatt. He writes about the Jets for The Athletic, and we are talking about, guess what? The head coach and the GM openings of the New York Jets. We're going to focus most of the show on the latest there, what Zach's hearing, Zach's thoughts. We're also going to touch on the other jobs around the NFL. Zach, you had a story out early this week, late last week, where you basically set up who's going everywhere. So that's great fun because we can hold you to it as these jobs start to get filled. You waited until after Vrabel went to New England, which is probably the easiest one. You gave up the easiest one.
I had written that already, and then he got the job. But I would say it was also before the Cowboys fired McCarthy, which threw a wrench into some things, I would say.
Yeah, so that changes everything. We'll talk about that as well. Before we get to all of that, and we'll touch on Aaron Rodgers' future, where you think that might lead. But London.
We're going
Jets
back
on the international schedule again. Zach, make sure the passport is ready to go. What is this? I mean, this is a pretty good gig you have going at this point. Like European vacation every year.
I know.
On the company.
I joked that I hope if I go somewhere after London this time that I don't have to deal with the head coaching firing. I feel pretty good about the fact that won't happen again. That I won't be in Paris when it happens. But yeah, I'd heard that this was probably going to happen because the Jets have wanted a home game in London for a bit. Woody very much likes London, as everybody knows. I think there's.
Can you explain why they would want a home game? Doesn't that?
Well, because then you get more. When the fans there's usually more of a home fan base. Gotcha. They get more access to more tickets, kind of thing. Because
that would be the 9th home game, right? Because
so they're they are losing schedule. One, but if you just consider it like a regular schedule, they really aren't. I know some fans are mad about that, but I don't know. I wouldn't be mad about going to London every year, frankly, but it's not like an amazing road schedule in terms of road trips and stuff like that. They go to Tampa Bay it's not the worst city.
It all depends on when that trip is, right? If
you go to New Orleans,
that's December.
You go to New Orleans. You go to New Orleans, which I'll actually be covering the Super Bowl, so I'll be going to New Orleans a few times this year. But so that's they're going back to London. I don't know who they'll be playing yet, but it's just a fun little thing for Woody. I think if he had his druthers, he would move the Jets to London, so I'm sure he's happy.
Somebody's going to move to London eventually, but I don't think it's going to be the Jets. That something tells me it would be a team that some other team, maybe the Jaguars. Yeah. All right, let's get into this coaching update. Let's start with the Jets, obviously. I'll say this first. In your story where you predict all these jobs, you said Brian Flores, but also that was before the Cowboys job opened. Yeah. Time has passed since then. So just overall thoughts from you on this process so far, how it's progressing and all of it.
I know Jets fans are getting very antsy. This has been one of the more, I think I was messaging with our Bears writer, Kevin Fishbane. I was like, I think the Bears and Jets are in competition to see who can interview more coaches. The Jets have the advantage of also interviewing the same amount of GMs. I believe they're up to, if you count Vrabel, I think they're up to 17 head coaching interviews. They added a new one yesterday.
Didn't they have a day when they did 5 of them?
That was GM. They did 5 GM interviews in one day, which I don't even know how that's possible, frankly.
I was going to say, I've done 5 interviews in a day in my job at The Athletic.
Interviewing
those were for
employees, yeah.
Those weren't for general manager jobs. You know what I mean?
Wild.
They were 30-minute, 5 of them.
I think the max you can do for an interview is 3 hours right now. I don't know that
you should if it's your GM. Shouldn't it be 3 hours? I mean, so that's 15 hours.
Yeah. I mean,
I guess they can overlap, but you don't want these guys running into each other in the hallway.
Yeah. I'd be fascinated to hear about how that played out. Yeah. I wonder if I can find that at some point, but it's been a very thorough process. I think that if Mike Vrabel had told the Jets he wanted the job, this would have wrapped up pretty quickly. But we all knew once the Patriots job opened, that wasn't happening. We won't get into that too much again because everybody knows how I feel about all that and all the noise about him using them for leverage and all that BS. But Dan Botter just kind of joked the 33rd team's getting paid by the interview. I genuinely do kind of wonder what the payment structure is for the 33rd team. If they just gave them a flat fee, is it by the hour? Because if it's by the hour, they're doing pretty well right now. if it's per interview, they're doing very well right now because it's over 30 interviews combined between head coach and GM. And it would not shock me if they added more to each list. Like I'm not trying to be funny. Like I think that would be interesting. But I would say, like, just from conversations I've had and just my read on the situation, I think if somebody had blown them away to the point where they're like, we need to hire this guy, I don't think this process would have necessarily gone this way. They haven't even started the second round of interviews yet. Some other teams have with the GM searches, and the Jets got a head start on theirs, and they still are kind of not going through the motions, but they're doing their due diligence to an extreme degree. I get a lot of the head coaching candidates on the list are not the most exciting names, and some in particular make Jets fans very angry at this mere suggestion that the Jets might hire them. But I think the Jets are operating as a team that wants to walk out of an interview feeling like they got their guy. And I'm not saying that people haven't impressed them. Like, I don't want to like conflate the two things. I think there's been coaches and GMs that have impressed them. I don't think any of them have impressed them in the way that like Vrabel did, where they walked out of the room being like, man, I could really see him like getting us out of this hole. And the other side of it is I think the Jets feel that they are a desirable destination, and they don't feel like they need to convince somebody to work for them. They feel like somebody needs to tell them why they should be running things, why they should be leading this team, why they should be the GM. I don't know. I'm not saying I agree with that.
Not sure about the self-awareness there.
That's just the impression I get. Maybe I'm wrong, but so that's why you're seeing them be this thera. You're seeing them, and that's part of why, and we're going to get into like who I think is going to get the job or contenders and stuff like that. But I think if there's a candidate that hasn't interviewed yet, I think they still have a chance to win this job, is what I would say. So anybody who's on the agenda, they have a shot. I think there are some that they have interviewed that do not have a shot. I'd remove, I don't think Steve Spagnuolo is going to be the next Jets coach, for example. I don't think Matt Nagy, as of right now, my gut says he won't be. I think Aaron Glenn absolutely still has a chance. Like, not going through all of them right now, but there's so many on the list that I need to pull up the list actually in front of me because I'm honestly forgetting some of the names. But like Ron Rivera, I don't necessarily see him getting the job. It'd be pretty hard to justify Mike Loxley or Darren Reese getting the job unless you're interviewing them to be a coordinator or something like that. Mm-hmm. We'll get into who I think are the legit contenders at some point, but that's kind of where I'm at. I think they still feel like they can be won over by somebody. And once they get through these head coaching interviews, I think they'll hire a GM first. And then the GM, I would think, would be, I don't know, like the way they're doing this process is interesting because you'd think they'd want the GMs to talk to all these candidates if they're seriously considered. But what might happen is they hired the GM, if they ever start these second interviews, which they haven't yet. They hired the GM, and then that GM is in on the second interviews with X and X, or maybe a coach that they haven't talked to yet, is what I would say.
Now, one guy who's not on this list of that the Jets are targeting, it seems, is Mike McCarthy, which probably makes the fan base fairly happy that they're not going to go that route.
Honestly, to a degree, like, it's interesting. I don't think fans necessarily want Mike McCarthy, but I think that they are mad that they aren't even talking to him when they're talking to everybody else. Like, that's the general reaction I've gotten.
Yeah.
But also, like, Mike McCarthy, he's such a fascinating candidate because I think he's going to keep getting jobs because you look at his resume and it's pretty good on paper, good record, won a Super Bowl with Green Bay. But he's also been able to succeed because he's inherited a lot of talented teams that have quarterbacks.
A lot of talent.
And he did not accomplish what he needed to with that group. I don't think you ever were worried about getting out schemed by Mike McCarthy. I don't think you were ever worried about, being out, toughed by like a Mike Vrabel team. When you go against him, they're always going to be tough. They're going to be prepared. And at the end of the game, they're going to make the right decisions. I don't know that you ever felt that way with McCarthy. I think he coached teams that had talent and they won games. And that there is something to be said about that. There are coaches that have talent and fail. But yeah, he's going to keep getting jobs by these teams because owners are going to look at his resume and see all the wins he has. But like, there's a reason also why, he was out of the league for that 1 year, why it didn't work out in Green Bay, all that stuff. Anyway, I wouldn't hire him. The Jets did consider him, and I believe it was the Adam Gase search. It was McCarthy. I always confuse the Saleh and Gase ones. I believe it was that one, and I think he was a contender, but I don't think they ultimately were sold on him in the interviews, and so they had that experience. Whereas like someone like Arthur Smith, they went through this process with before and they liked him. So I think that's why you're seeing Arthur Smith in this process and not Mike McCarthy, even if you look at their resumes and you might be like, what the hell are you doing? And I think that's what fans are doing right now when it comes to that.
The chat does agree that it was Gase over McCarthy for that search, which maybe there was no win. Maybe that was a no-win situation.
Yeah.
You're talking about that.
It often is, honestly. So.
All right. So at this point, right now, in this minute, who do you think? I don't know if I could say who gets the job, but who are like the two GMs and head coach favorites in your mind?
So I'm going to give a few for head coach because I feel like I have a better feel of that one. The GM one is a little more wide open. Aaron Glenn is absolutely a contender, and I would say the odds-on favorite. I predict him Brian Flores because what I was saying earlier. I think he's gonna go into that room and really impress them. I think they want a coach who has a real plan for how he's gonna, change things. Who his offensive coordinator is going to be, what GMs he would like to work with, and I think Brian Flores will have answers for all of that. I think he's learned there are questions about him, absolutely. The way his Dolphins tenure ended, his relationships with players. By all accounts, he's learned a lot from that. Mike Silver had a great story about him and Ryan Grigson.
Yeah.
And their relationship in Minnesota and the players just buying in on Flores. And I think
and that's the obvious thing here, right? Like, is that a package? Flores and Grigson?
Yeah, that would be I'll get into that with the GM side of things. But so Flores and Glenn for sure. I think Arthur Smith is a real contender for this job. And I know fans don't want to hear that. And it's a lot different than what I wrote a couple weeks ago, where I said he was not really an option because what I'd heard is that he wasn't interested. But I think things maybe changed a little bit as the Steelers season kind of fell apart. And I don't know that he's getting fired necessarily by Pittsburgh, but all of a sudden, I don't know if that's as stable of a situation. And so I think he's looking around, and I think he knows he can go into that room, and he knows that they like him in the Jets building, and he's a guy with head coaching experience. So I think he's a contender and a wild card for me. And I think fans would be more excited about this one. Let me make sure I'm not forgetting anybody else first. Yeah, okay, I'm not. This isn't the one, but I like Joe Brady. He hasn't interviewed yet. He's done really well for himself in the playoffs. He's done really well as a tactician. I don't know how he is as a leader. But yeah, the wild card one is Josh McCown. There's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, beloved by the fan base. Number two, beloved by Woody Johnson, I think he was in Christopher Johnson's wedding. Something like that, I believe. Very close with the building. He knows the building. They know him. He's basically been a coach for most of his playing career into his coaching career. He did an amazing job with Sam Darnold. He's now in the Kevin O'Connell coaching tree. He's learned all these different systems. I think players would respect him and like him. There are obviously a lot of questions because he doesn't have a lot of coaching experience. But I would be more okay with him as the head coach than I would the offense. Joe C, our Badlands honcho, has been pulling for Josh McCown as a legit candidate, and I think I feel better about him leading an entire operation than maybe calling plays on offense when he's never done that specifically.
That's interesting, like head coach but not coordinator. You think of it.
I mean,
a lot
feel
of
like
times you think of it the other way.
I know. I just think he's a great leader, and I think he knows what he's doing. I think he could run the whole operation. Play calling, like when a guy hasn't done it yet, there's just always going to be questions about his ability to do it. I also think McCown would be a possible OC for Brian Flores, is what I've heard too. So there's a possible package deal where he comes in. And so that's where I'm at with the head coaches. And then GM wise, again, I think they're still, like I said, alluded to with like the head coach search, I think they're waiting for somebody to kind of win them over. I would say in terms of Zoom interviews, some of these have been in person, but and this applies to the head coach thing. I should stipulate too. I find it hard to believe that somebody can like completely win a room over via Zoom interview. It's pretty hard to do that. I mean, I know I'm pretty endearing on this podcast and I win everybody who listens over because everybody loves me, but I'm just kidding. But so anyway, I think GM is just always such an interesting search because you never know with these assistant GMs what they actually do, what impact they've made. But I think the names that the fans want are legit contenders. Guys like Alec Hallaby from the Eagles. I think Mike Borgonzi from the Chiefs. He's getting a second interview with the Titans. I'm intrigued by the Packers guy, John Eric Sullivan, I believe his name is. He's been in that organization a few years. He's done a pretty good job. And I mean, and the one that keeps coming up that I think fans are not excited about would be Ryan Grigson. A lot of that's tied to his ties with Brian Flores. He has experience. I know the downsides. He kind of wore out his welcome in Indy. A lot of people blame him for the downfall of Andrew Luck's career and wanting to retire early. I'd say the fans are most passionately against Ryan Grigson and Arthur Smith. I think if you want to talk full apocalypse scenario, that would be the pairing where you might lose fans or there'd be a riot in Florham Park. But like the GM, I just want to say I have less of a read on who's impressed them the most out of that group. But those are the ones that make most sense to me. Alec Hallaby personally intrigues me the most. He's kind of has an Andrew Berry-esque background coming up through Harvard, the Eagles front office. He's been there forever. He came in at the very bottom and he worked his way up, learned from Howie Roseman. He produces a lot of great GMs, and I think he's really smart. And so you maybe you get a guy like that, and then you also bring in whether it's a Chris Spielman or Don Aponte or somebody like that to be a president of football ops and kind of have a tag team like that. And I think that would be really, really good. I don't know how Alec Hallaby did in his interview. I know he's very highly regarded around the league. He's had some interviews in the past, but like if I was picking the two that I would personally hire off both lists, I think I would go Brian Flores and Alec Hallaby. Honestly, it's kind of a weird pairing, and you'd have to make sure that Hallaby and Brian Flores could get along. But I like that pairing personally.
All right. There's also this thing that came up.
Oh yeah.
In the Discord, got a question for Flight Plan, our favorite podcaster, Florio, saying to watch the Jets if they hire his college roommate, Darren, is it Moogie? I think to be the GM. Moogie. They would trade for Kevin O'Connell. Thoughts?
I mean, I think that Mike Florio likes to throw shit at the wall generally. So I'm surprised he didn't mention Aaron Rodgers in this clip. But
are you starting a war here? Be careful. Careful.
But I mean, he is connected. Like I'm just messing a little bit, only a little. But yeah, the O'Connell thing, like there was rumblings about him being pursued via trade towards the end of the season. I don't see that happening. I think a lot of it's tied to the fact that he hasn't signed an extension yet. He's a great coach. I know they've faltered in the playoffs a couple times. So I wonder if that's the hesitance in Minnesota. If he became available, the Jets, I think, would absolutely try for him. I mean, he was a Jet. They loved him in the building when he was a backup quarterback there. Ironically, Mike Tannenbaum was the one that cut him. And it was a very they actually showed it on Hard Knocks when he was cut by Mike Tannenbaum. So I imagine Kevin O'Connell remembers that. So I don't know if that would be a part of the thought process, because like the clip on Hard Knocks is like Kevin O'Connell walks into the room before he can even sit down. Mike Tannenbaum tells him he's cut. It's like a brief convo, and then he's out of the room. It's very awkward. But I don't see it happening. But again, this is like I was asked about Mike Tomlin on Jake Asman's radio show the other day. Like if he was available in a trade, would the Jets go after him? Yeah. I mean, the fact that they haven't hired a coach. Kevin O'Connell is probably one of the 5 to 10 best coaches in the NFL, in my opinion. Great play caller. You absolutely go for that.
Great quarterback guy. Maybe more.
Great quarterback guy. And maybe you can get Sam Darnold and Josh McCown. You bring all these Jets quarterbacks back in the room, go all in. But yeah, so that's where I'm at with that. I don't see it happening, but I think they would be interested if he was on the block.
Man, Sam took a hit as far as
yeah, that was tough. Yeah. It's crazy because we talked about him a bunch on here, I feel like, just over the course of the season. But his stock was so high. He's probably headed towards 30 to 40 million a year. Maybe a franchise tag in Minnesota. And now it feels like they've already, the way O'Connell was talking, it sounds like maybe they're ready to turn to McCarthy now. And this is going to affect
and a bunch
of
teams, right? Were lining up to trade for McCarthy too. It was all these dominoes, and now
so
suddenly
it's. I mean, I still think Sam Darnold can be a starting quarterback in the NFL. He showed that, but it's pretty clear how you can stop him, and that's by blitzing him and making him uncomfortable. So that's going to be a factor. But he's still better than some of the quarterbacks around. He could start if he was the starting quarterback for the Raiders this season, for example. How much better are they? Teams need quarterbacks. The Jets need a quarterback, and so I'm very curious to see what his market looks like now.
All right, let's go through these other positions, and I'll just say who you have pinpointed for all of them. Cowboys, like you said, wasn't part of the story, but we should note that Robert Saleh got an interview with the Cowboys. You created a little bit of a stir in the story by having Robert Saleh getting the Jaguars job. You want to start there?
Yeah. I think he has a real shot at it. I didn't think that would get as much attention as it did. I thought it would just be Jets fans being like, "Are you serious?" But I got asked to go on a Jacksonville radio show. Went on this other radio show, and that was like a lot of the point of conversation. I guess it makes sense. Like he was unsuccessful in New York, and
right,
did a lot of, he said a lot of crazy things. But
he was also on Hard Knocks, so people got maybe more
Knocks.
Insight into him.
Yeah,
than a regular.
But what I wrote in there and what I've said on these shows is they really like him in that building. I think he's always going to do well in an interview setting like that. He's getting interviews across the board now. The Cowboys job, like the idea of him coaching the Cowboys is kind of funny to me because he had a hard time with the New York media, and the Cowboys are the most famous franchise outside of the Yankees, probably in sports. So that'd be a fascinating one. I don't see that happening, but who knows? But yeah, I think I've said this, weirdly, Woody firing him when he did probably was the best thing that could have happened for his career. Because if he finishes out the season and they have a disappointing season, which I think they still were going to ultimately, it would have been better. Like maybe they get 7 wins instead of 5, or maybe they get 8 wins and they miss the playoffs, and he's still getting fired. And it looks like he was unable to achieve despite having Aaron Rodgers all 17 games. Instead, they're 2-3, a game out of the division. He gets fired. They win 3 games the rest of the year. They're an absolute disaster. The defense gets worse. The discipline gets worse. It makes everybody forget that they were undisciplined when he coached them. So it's helped his stock now to where he has a legit shot at a job where if he goes to Jaguars, their roster is way more talented than the Jets was in 2021. The irony of him having Trevor Lawrence when he was given Zach Wilson that first year, when the Jets maybe should have had Trevor Lawrence, if not for some meaningless wins. They have some offensive weapons. I'd be curious if he'd hire Michael LaFleur as his OC again. That'd be funny. But
that would be funny.
I think it's a legit possibility. I don't necessarily think like he's the front runner or whatever. I think they'll go after people like Ben Johnson or Liam Cohen or some of the others. Todd Monken. They're interviewing a lot of these guys, but I think he has a real shot at that job. And a big plus for him is, Trent Baalke. They didn't cross paths in San Francisco. Everybody was shocked that Trent Baalke saved his job. Him and Joe Shane, like those are the biggest shockers, I think. I don't know that a lot of coaches want to work with Trent Baalke. I think Robert Saleh would. And so that also helps him to a degree, like his willingness to take it on and all that.
It is fascinating that Saleh is getting interviews for head coaching positions. And obviously Ulbrich is not.
Yeah. Well, he got a Jets interview.
Yeah. Yes. But if you had said at that point, right, like where it would go, you would think like, oh, if the Jets managed to do okay the rest of the way, like Ulbrich will maybe get some interviews. Or even a year ago, right? Like last offseason, we talked about how Ulbrich was lining himself up to get all these interviews. Yeah. And you wouldn't have thought Saleh would. It's fascinating how this stuff plays
out. And now even more kind of funny is that the Niners fired their DC. Last year, they tried to hire Ulbrich. Now both Ulbrich and Saleh are available. And I wouldn't be surprised if one of them wound up being the 49ers DC also, like just full circle all the time.
That's why they call it
NFL coaching cycle.
Carousel.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. The carousel is always fascinating the way it works.
Yeah. All right, these other jobs, Saints, you have Aaron Glenn because you don't have him going to the Jets. Do you think if the Jets and Saints both said it's your job, do you think he picks the Saints over the Jets?
No, I think he would pick the Jets actually, if it was between the two. And I think somebody maybe reported, I didn't see the article, but I think somebody reported that he prefers them. It might just be rumblings. I don't know. It's hard to read through a lot of like what agents are putting out there and all that stuff this time of the year. But I do think that I'm intrigued at the idea of McCarthy with the Saints. I think that would be an interesting landing spot for him. And then hypothetically, if Aaron Rodgers, we're going to get into Aaron Rodgers in a bit. So I won't even step on that now, but I think the Saints would be a possibility to for a remarriage of those two after their divorce. But yeah, so I based on me thinking that Flores is the Jets coach, I think Glenn gets a Saints job. It just feels like he's getting a chance this time, and it would be one of those things where if he didn't, I think everybody would kind of lose their mind. Like, how did that guy not get a job like they did with Bieniemy for so many years?
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, hottest coach maybe is now that Vrabel's gone. Ben Johnson. You have him slotted for the Raiders.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing he's going to pass up jobs again, like for basically the third straight year. These jobs aren't the most appealing ones. I think the Bears one in theory would have been, but them keeping the GM on the way they did, and they're a little dysfunctional over there with ownership. I don't know that it's the most appealing job, and you have to really like Caleb Williams. Like, if you don't like him, then that's not that appealing of a job. So, and the Raiders, Tom Brady's running things. I think that helps them. I think they'll be willing to throw the bag at Ben Johnson, and I think the fact that they fired their GM would give Ben maybe the ability to be a part of the process for choosing the GM or be involved in personnel, like things like that, which I think they don't have a quarterback, which is a factor in why he didn't want the Jets job for among other reasons. But there's been a lot of buzz about that. And so that's why I went with Ben to the Raiders. I do think Pete Carroll would be.
They don't have a quarterback, but they do have a pick where they could get a quarterback.
Yeah.
Potentially. Yeah. Although I don't know if you want that quarterback.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a bad quarterback class, but yeah. And I think Pete Carroll would be another option there. I know we're going to get into him as well.
Yes. And you have Pete Carroll. And I think this makes all the sense in the world because the Bears have gone through so many coaches. It just makes sense to me that the Bears would hire like the safe guy, right? Like the proven, like this guy's won just about everywhere he's gone. Players love him. He knows what he's doing. It's going to be kind of a clean operation like Pete Carroll.
Yeah. The Bears coaching search has been more interesting to me than the Jets one in terms of who they've talked to, because their search has been more wide ranging and not just like this guy was a head coach before, although they talked to Arthur Smith today, but like they're either have or will be talking to Matt Campbell from Iowa State, who I thought the Jets would, and that hasn't happened yet. David Shaw, who I'm very high on personally. I was saying this in the Discord yesterday. I think he was really good at Stanford. He's really smart. He has coaching background in the NFL. His players love him. And the last year he spent in personnel with the Broncos, so we saw another side of things. So I think he's an interesting candidate. But Mike McCarthy, it sounds like, is very interested in that job too. And it would be very weird seeing him as the Bears coach after all the years he went against them as a Packers coach. But yeah, I went with Pete because the word you keep hearing out of Chicago is that they want a, air quotes, leader of men. And Mike Vrabel was the best example of whatever cliche that is.
Whatever that means.
Yeah. But, the Bears are just an organization that needs stability like the Jets do. That's why I've said this. If I was the Jets, forget Aaron Glenn, forget Brian Flores. Like, I'd give Pete Carroll whatever he wants. Let him turn the thing around. I know he's 73. He doesn't act like he's 73. I don't know that Pete Carroll wants to go to the Jets after the way he was treated many, many years ago when they fired him after 1 year. But I think he could fix a lot of what's wrong with the Jets, and then he could probably get a coach in waiting to replace him down the line, or whether he works in personnel or whatever it is. But anyway, I think, Pete Carroll consistently, the Seahawks team, even if they underperform, maybe once you get to the playoffs sometimes, they did win a Super Bowl. I think he won at least 7 games in every season of his Seahawks tenure. I think he made the playoffs 10 out of 14 years. Like, just wildly successful. Players love him.
He made Russell Wilson a great quarterback, which since then, I don't know.
Not worked out. And you never really heard anybody saying anything bad about him either. Like,
no.
And there was a lot of bad talk out of Seattle. Like, I mean, maybe Marshawn Lynch wasn't his biggest fan at a certain point, but so I think he makes a lot of sense for the Bears. He interviewed with them. I imagine he did really well in the interview. So that's why I landed on him. Like, I could see him with the Raiders job though, like I said.
Do we do Cowboys? We just mentioned Saleh.
We haven't predicted it. I mean, there's been a lot of buzz about Deion Sanders. I don't know if I see that happening. I don't know. I don't really have a good feel for that one.
Deion gets the Cowboys job and then somehow forces Shader, like some, you know what I mean? Like goes all Eli Manning.
Trade Dak Prescott to the Titans or something like that.
Yeah, and somehow end up with his son at quarterback.
They already are a circus, but that would be like all anybody talked about every day, all the time. And I'm not even sure that he's a good coach. He's a personality and like good recruiter, but there's plenty of evidence that he's not maybe a good X's and O's coach. Kellen Moore is somebody that makes a lot of sense. He played there, coached there as a play caller. He's done a good job with Jalen Hurts and the Eagles offense. I don't know. I imagine they're going to aim pretty high. I bet you he calls Bill Belichick. I don't know if that's going to happen. I wonder what would have happened if this was open at the very beginning. Would Mike Vrabel have considered it? Would Belichick have considered it? All those things. So I don't know. That's it was poorly handled by Jerry Jones as always, because he did it a little too long. He takes his time as an old man running a team, I guess. But yeah, I don't see Saleh getting that job. I'll say that.
Yeah, the Belichick one thing's interesting because that team is like built to get him the record in 2 years if he knew it was going and before he went to Carolina. But anyway, all right, Aaron Rodgers. Let's touch on that before we get to the picks. You have a theory, Zach.
Yeah, if he doesn't retire, I can't get the Steelers out of my head, especially because of the way their season ended. Russell Wilson not being the guy after it seemed like maybe they were going to extend him. Mike Tomlin is somebody that would have Aaron's respect, and Aaron would have his respect. Devontae Adams could sign there. They would have the ability to bring both of them in. They are ready to win right now with a ready-made defense. Like maybe Aaron doesn't want to bounce around the league at the end of his career like Brett Favre did. Like maybe he wants to go out the way he, with a 4-touchdown game with the Jets and all the drama. But I don't know if the Steelers called him, would he listen? I think he might. And this is not me reporting or me knowing anything that he wants or anything like that. I just think it logically makes a lot of sense, especially if the Steelers are going to be going all in, which I think they will, because there's a lot of noise about how they keep falling short with Mike Tomlin. And that's why you heard all the noise about him getting traded. Like they probably need to go and get whatever the best quarterback option is. And I don't know that they have access to a better one than Aaron Rodgers. He's better than Russell Wilson. He's better than Kirk Cousins. Depends on what you feel about Sam Darnold. I don't know that you would feel great about him in the playoffs based on what's happened. And so that's why I think if Aaron Rodgers plays, like my leading contender right now is the Steelers, and I'm intrigued by the Saints if they hire Mike McCarthy. I'll say that.
Yeah, that would be interesting getting them back together.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else from the coaching, everything that's going on there before we get to a picks update?
Yeah, I'll just say, so Saturdays when they can start doing in-person interviews for teams that are not in the playoffs anymore. So that'll be really telling about who gets second interviews, who they do them with. I would think they want to wrap up the GM search pretty soon, but I can't say that for sure because they haven't even done a single second interview unless one of the people, unaware to me, has blown them away and they want to offer him the job. I think this process will probably go into next week, but I don't know. Maybe it'll go quickly over the next few days. But Saturday,
and whenever it does happen, we'll hop on.
Yeah, we'll do probably as long as. I mean, of course, I'm going away this weekend, so you can count on something happening. I'll be gone Saturday to Monday, so you can count on the Jets making a hiring, but we'll make it work. But yeah, so let's
bring your microphone.
Yeah, good call. I will.
All right, the things continue. This is the best. This is almost as good as the NFL playoffs at this point. Is our picks pool and how it's going because we remain tied at the top. Historic STE Joe 2356, both 2-2 are both with 2 wins during the wild card, but they also opened the door by only having 2 right in the wild card weekend because Jimbo Brennan, who was a early season leader, I think, got 4 right in the wild card round, and he is back in contention. So it's 105 and 105 for the top 2. Jimbo Brennan 2 back for 3rd. So things are interesting.
Sure are. Down to the wire. The first round was so disappointing. We were both so excited about these matchups, but
I know
there was only like one good one.
Yeah, and that was the game I really didn't care about.
I know the Buccaneers one
was the Redskin. Sorry. Sorry about that. The Commanders game. The Commanders game was the one that I was like, I don't, and I ended up watching the whole thing because it was great.
I thought the Eagles Packers one was going to be better. I thought all these games. I mean, this next round should be better, but man, it would just suck if there's all blowouts again.
This is always. I feel like this is.
It's always a good divisional round's always good.
It's always the best weekend because you get the 2 doubleheaders, clean cut. I think
what we're finding out is the 7th seed thing just hasn't really worked out for the most part.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I'd say the
Eagles and Bills really rolled.
And,
the Eagles game was ugly, but they were never really in danger.
And I'd say the Rams have a little they have a little, I don't know, karma is the right word behind them right now because all the stuff that happened in LA with the fires, it just feels like they just came out and Matthew Stafford looked amazing. I did not see that game going that way. Their defense looked amazing, and they haven't been a great defense all year. So I'm very interested to see how they handle the Eagles because that's gonna be probably a better game than I would have guessed a couple weeks ago.
The Eagles are interesting because I just feel like unless they go to the Super Bowl, there's going to be the hot seat, right? you just can't escape because of the expectations around that team. Even though on paper they probably don't have a the Lions should be the team, but yeah, we will see. This will be an interesting weekend. Get those picks in. Obviously, only 2 games here, so if you're Jimbo Brennan, you got to trim it to 1 here, or I think it's over. The other 2 guys keep going. So thanks for participating in the picks pool this year. Any last thoughts before we say go? Oh, do we want to pick these games?
Yeah, we might as well while we're here. Let me pull up
this
the
is
schedule.
Good producing, by the way.
Oh yeah,
good.
We came up with it in the moment. That's how you know
producing.
it's good. All right, let's see.
This is what you get when you stream the show live instead of recording.
All right, we got Saturday is Texans Chiefs to start out. It looks like the line is Chiefs -8.5.
I'm gonna say Chiefs win, but Texans cover.
I'm gonna say I think the Chiefs are gonna cover.
Okay.
The Texans looked way better than I expected last week because they did not look good at the end of the season. But
that's why I'm shocked. And
by the way, Bobby Sloak is someone who hasn't done his interview yet with the Jets, so I wonder what's going on with that. But I think the Chiefs always turn it on in the playoffs, so we'll see how that looks. Commanders Lions is the other one. Lions -9.5. That's a pretty high line, actually.
I was actually talking to yesterday. One of our coworkers at the Athletic lives in Kansas City, and I was I was just curious what the fan base is like because it's been a weird season, right? They're 15-2, but they could be like
9-8.
They could be like 10-7, I think, based on the way those games have gone. And he said that because of last year, everyone in Kansas City just says they're going to go to the Super Bowl.
Wow.
There's no doubts.
Must be nice being a fan. Must be nice being a fan for a team like that, where you can be like, whatever. They've been sloppy all year. We're not worried.
Well, you know what? If you have Patrick Mahomes, all right, that's what it takes. All right, so Commanders Lions 9.5. I don't know. This Commanders team is just I don't think they win. I think the Lions definitely win, but I feel like this Commanders team just has some magic and they could keep it close.
Yeah, I agree. I think Commanders +9.5. I would take that, but I think the Lions win. I think the Lions are going to win it all, frankly, as of right now.
That'd be great.
I think it's a legit possibility we get a Lions-Bills Super Bowl, which would be so fun because those are 2 of the most tortured fan bases in sports. So,
that would be the guard. Well, they were the Indians at the time. So like I said, the Indians and the Cubs in 2016 in the World Series, where you're the Cubs hadn't won it in 118 years. I think the now Guardians, it was 60 years or 70 years. That kind of fun. I think that would get. I believe that would get huge ratings, right? Lions Bills. I know it's not a major market, but
but I think people
Super
would be
Bowl, so it doesn't matter, and people are going to be people will be into it. All right, Rams Eagles is 6.5. Eagles by 6.5. I think maybe they win by 7.
Yeah, I think the Eagles are going to win that one. But I think it might be closer. I don't know. It's just so will the vibes keep carrying over for the Rams? That talent wise, it's not even close between the 2 teams. But but the last game of the slate is the best one easily.
Coaching though, you could say maybe isn't close either.
Yes, true. McVay is quite good. Ravens Bills though is one of the best
game of the
weekend you could possibly.
Yeah.
You can convince me in any direction. You convince me one kills the other. You can convince me it's the best game we see. I lean towards the Bills winning, but man, the Ravens are scary when they're really rolling. Lamar is playing so well right now. Derrick Henry is a beast.
I can't believe the Ravens are favored by a point.
Yeah, by a point. Yeah,
in Buffalo. I'm a little surprised by that. I don't know where it opened though. Did that line move to that?
Sure, it did,
I don't know. I just think it's the Bills' year, at least to get back to the Super Bowl, despite all those fans in Kansas City that think it's done deal. I think the Bills go to the Super Bowl. So I think they'll get by this one. And I honestly think if they get by this one, I think the Bills could blow out the Chiefs in the AFC Championship just because they've lost to them so many times.
Man, it'd be rough if the Bills get to the AFC Championship and lose again. I feel like it'd be better for them to lose this round, honestly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, from a psyche perspective.
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
All right.
I think it's gonna be a fun. Always this weekend, like we said, this is always the best weekend of the playoffs.
Yeah,
you get the 4 games; they're all good teams. It should be fun. We will be back unless the Jets hire someone in the next few days. Plan on us being back same time next week, sometime on Wednesday. And thank you everybody for tuning in. We had a good audience today. The offseason must be here, Zach. We got
offseason champions.
triple audience here in the off season. It's great to see. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll talk to everybody later from the Flight Plan.